Hello everyone. Hope you are having great time learning from attending the sessions, engaging in activities and networking with people around the globe. I'm 𝐓𝐚𝐫𝐢𝐪 from Developer Relations team at 𝐊𝐴 Test, and we got an exciting talk lined up that will change and challenge our perspectives on testing and quality in the age of AI. In this session, Automating Quality, a vision beyond AI for testing, we will dive into how AI can not only automate our software testing tasks, but also transform the very concept of our quality throughout the software development lifecycle. Have you ever thought about how AI can go beyond just aiding in testing to actually automating and enhancing the quality by itself? That's exactly what we will explore today. Our speaker, Tariq King, is a pioneer in software testing and quality engineering. As the CEO and head of Testml, Tariq brings over 15 years of experience and a profound understanding of how AI is revolutionizing our industry. He will be discussing the current landscape of AI driven test automation, practical strategies for integrating generative AI into software lifecycle, and future of quality engineering. As always, feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A tab and we will address them during the end of the session. Also, keep the session engaging by posting your thoughts in the chat on the left side, on the right side, and please keep spamming emojis down below. Tariq, it's an honor to have you today. How are you?
I'm good, Sparsh. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Tariq, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. I'll go ahead and share my screen. There we go. All right, so that was a great introduction. I think I'm always impressed with how well this conference is organized and streamed online. Today, I hope to kind of get you into a space where you can go a little bit beyond our current way of thinking and where we're at. It's a very exciting time to be in testing, there's no doubt. And many of you are probably very familiar with the use of generative AI and large language models for doing software testing tasks. This is kind of going to take a step back first to kind of look back at how we envisioned the future of testing, and then bring you up to present day, and then actually think about what happens beyond and from here on, right? So yeah, as Sparsh said, my name is Tariq King. I think mostly I'm just really in love with the software engineering and software testing disciplines and how we do this right. And I think it always resonates. I think if I go back to about 2015, I'm always the person that at various checkpoints starts to think about the future. And in 2015, I was doing just that, kind of thinking about what would be the future of software testing, what would it look like. I had been challenged to look for new and innovative ways to make software testing better. And the fact of the matter is that back then, our kind of insights on testing were that it really still continued to be quite of a manual endeavor. So whether you think about exploratory testing or human present testing, which is inherently something that humans need to be actively engaged in and involved in, hands to keyboard, or you even thought about automation, this was still the current state where there was still a lot of human effort required to actually create test scripts. The only thing automated was the execution. And at the time, I met a gentleman named Jason Arbin that had been also working and thinking about the software testing space and the future of it, and how it could be kind of made better. And we formulated kind of a grand vision that we had at the time. Could we have testing that was totally lights off when it comes to the philosophy of testing? So just like manufacturing, a lights out philosophy meant that you could turn off the lights in the factory and have everyone execute, and still the machines could continue running without the need for human intervention. And so we formulated that space at the time and started really pushing content on the use of AI for software testing. And these were kind of categorized into three buckets: AI-driven test automation, so building tools that would infuse AI into the actual tools themselves to give testing tools new capabilities. different methods for testing AI systems. So of course you can't build something with AI in it and as a part of it without thinking about the reliability of the system itself and what needs to be done to validate the AI itself. And then a topic that was quite close to me, which is that the fact that because AI systems are very adaptive and they can change at runtime, we need to design the system with testing in mind, testing as part of the runtime, part of the architectural design, so that we kind of get to a space where we can do self-testing systems. And so at that time, after knowing Jason for some time, we got together and I joined his company, Testml AI, and we started working on really driving AI-driven testing across the board. And I was really fortunate at the time to be, number one, working with real AI in production for very large clients, as well as had an opportunity at O'Reilly to start publishing some of the work that we were doing. And it is really cool. Like if you stop to think about how AI can help software testing, there was a number of areas. We had real experience applying AI to the traditional core problems in testing that we always tend to start with typically when you think of automation. So UI-driven automation, how can we use AI to actually identify objects on the screen and click on things just like humans would and be resilient to change because of that computer vision aspect. The tests themselves were very reusable. So now we could not just test a single app in the App Store. We could think about testing domains of applications in addition to the entire App Store and running tests on all of the apps, which was pretty cool to do at a large scale. And also thinking about some specialized domains where you don't have as much automation capabilities as in others, right? Selenium isn't going to help you to automate your game unless your game is embedded in a web browser, specifically with a DOM. But computer vision and the use of reinforcement learning could help you to not only validate the game visually, but actually run through actual scenarios in the game and do testing. Still to this day, some of these projects are some of the best that I've ever worked on. And last but not least, another clearly hard problem is how do you validate video quality, especially for video streaming applications, right? So we saw that AI had the potential to transform and really make a difference in software testing. And we predicted like a bit of a takeover that we would start to see initially some small pockets where you're using AI for UI testing and core things like API or even unit testing. But then as we were ourselves even doing our own investigation, we were starting to see its applicability across non-functional concerns or cross-cutting concerns, as we like to call them. So AI for performance testing, AI for UI design and usability, or to check trustworthiness and security. And so, again, we were looking forward, thinking that this is something that could happen. And then also acknowledging that for this to happen, we need to make sure that the AI itself that is embedded as part of these frameworks or as part of these tools is itself self-testable, right? Because if you can make such dynamic decisions, there needs to be some guardrails. And even if initially at first the humans were involved in guiding the AI or making some corrections that would reinforcement learning feeding back into the system, eventually it would be able to take over some of these testing tasks and make that in a part of the self-testing loop. And so now, fast forward like about a decade to 2024, and we've been living now in the era of generative AI, which, similar to the adaptive nature of AI, is very dynamic. And it's pretty cool to see now we have capabilities that had been there in part, but are now just booming and widespread. So now we have algorithms that can be used to generate natural language conversations, create different types of artistry like audio, images, even videos, and do so without much intervention from humans, right? So back to this lights out philosophy that we've been dreaming about for software testing. And last year I had a lot of fun with a couple of audiences. This year I'll have some more fun with them but showing how AI can generate things that we can't tell the difference between, the so-called imitation game. Like these are all photorealistic faces of people that do not exist, right? Completely AI generated using generative adversarial networks. And it goes beyond just faces. AI can generate artwork in the form of these paintings. Also, we can't tell the difference between the music it generates. It's clear to see that the capability is uh, uh, so very well refined at this point that we can't tell the difference, right? Um, and of course, like the thing that kind of started a lot of it for many of us is chat GPT and natural language generation using large language models. And I always tell people, like, the big win from a chat GPT perspective, in addition to obviously the natural language itself, was that this was what was the turning point for really making AI very believable for many people. For many years, even at Test AI, like we would have people just asking us to show them the AI, because even though we showed them these cool capabilities, they really wanted to see and interact with it. And this is what ChatGPT really did for us, right? It made AI be something that we could interact with on a daily basis and have as a kind of permanent assistant day in and day out. It made AI very usable and understandable, and now we can do a lot more, right? And so it's no wonder that like we've been kind of focused on leveraging generative AI, and in particular those language generation capabilities for software testing. And there are several generative AI assisted testing activities and use cases that typically come out as part of this. The first one being test case development, design, and the creation of test cases. So whether it be analyzing requirements and generating tests that cover those requirements in terms of the functionality of the application, thinking about user acceptance tests, or looking at source code and design. So again, also from a more functional standpoint into more of an implementation base, we can now use this to generate complete test scripts, right? So no longer is it us taking test cases and manually typing them or translating them into like a machine readable form. Now AI can just do all that on its own, and then update them and evolve them as the application changes. Things like test planning and being an assistant there with documentation, using it for migration projects is always a good thing, where there's no documentation, and now we can reverse engineer much of that documentation, which leads us into just thinking about overall maintenance, right, and management of the testing process, whether it be test cases or looking for duplicate artifacts, whether it be tests or defects, and just simplifying the complexity of testing using generative AI. And of course, it's very good at mimicking things. So thinking about things like synthetic data, and one of the biggest problems is actually moving into a real world environment, right? And now having real data, and now we see that we've missed the mark on our software engineering efforts. And with synthetic data generation, we can now start to look at these complex real world data sets and generate synthetic data that looks and feels like real world data, but doesn't have a lot of the privacy and security issues that you would have using production data. And then last but not least, thinking about test execution, reporting, and so on and so forth. Of course, using predictive analytics to make sure that we can triage failures automatically, or just summarizing the vast quantity of bugs and logs that are out there, so that humans can actually ingest them and make smart decisions. And so this is our current state that we're in right now, where everyone is looking at all of these different use cases within testing, and it's quite exciting, right? Um, but it's broader than that. Like when I actually look across the board, this is not just our discipline looking at this. This is across the board. Everyone who's doing anything in any domain is thinking about how can we use generative AI to help us become more productive, right? How can we get efficiency gains from it? And it's not just about spitting out things faster. You can always spit out artifacts faster. That doesn't mean that you have an overall productivity gain. But it's really threefold, right? It is that throughput, but coupled with the fact that you need to be producing meaningful artifacts, right? Otherwise, you're just going to have a lot of rework and wasted effort, which is just an overhead when it comes to cost efficiencies, right? So it is this quantity, quality, and efficiency game that brings us together for overall productivity. And this is where, like, when I start to think about everything that's happening in the testing space, really starts to translate into the overall life cycle. So, of course, anyone who knows anything about testing knows like testing is not this phase that happens at the end of the life cycle, but we need to be thinking holistically at every stage of development, right? And so, a tester's concern is really one that flows from the inception of an idea to requirements engineering, all the way through designing the user interfaces, the architectural design, implementation, testing, and deployment until it gets into the hands of an end user or customer. And, you know, generative AI is very useful for helping with all of the above. It's very generally applicable. One thing I want to draw your attention to here that's very important, though, is understanding that when you embark on such a journey to try to transform the life cycle, you need to have a solid foundation of engineering practices, things like your agile practices, shifting left and paying attention to quality early, overall quality engineering, testing, CI/CD, etc. Like it is not built on top of something that you can't measure, something that you can't baseline. So just understand that there's still a need for this foundational injects that needs to happen. And then these generative tools can actually give us an order of magnitude, in my opinion, of gains, right? But I'm going to just walk through the life cycle as we see it and how AI is helping. First thing, obviously, at the requirements end that you can think of is simply, generating user stories with acceptance criteria, right? Um, and from a testing perspective and a testing mindset at first, it starts off with just thinking that, hey, you know what, we need to validate the requirements, right? Make sure we're building the right thing. Well, AI can actually help you up front to spit out the right things, right? If you feed it the right conversations that might be happening and you feed it the right data, let AI do the heavy lifting and actually generate those user stories for you and actually try to do a comparative analysis and fill the gaps itself. Um, when it comes to the UI mockups and generative AI and all the um, uh, generative adversarial networks and the progress there on photos, it's amazing at actually putting together an entire user experience, right? Being trained on what good user experiences look like. Um, at 𝐓𝐚, we do a lot of open source. I drove a lot of the open source projects when I first joined in the testing space. One such AI project is this AI Genie, which is really a plugin for Jira that helps you do generative AI tasks from within Jira related to user stories. So you can generate acceptance criteria in natural language, bring in your own large language model and configure it so it's completely free. And it can also generate sequence diagrams that represent those user stories to help you do requirements analysis and validation with customers. And the reason I mention this is because, like, number one, like, uh, it's just cool to have these types of capabilities at our fingertips. But also, it is kind of uh, indicative of how I see things unfolding. I see generative AI technologies coming into the tools and frameworks that people use on an everyday basis, right? So we're not trying to force some other tool down their throats, but wherever a particular role is living, that's where I would see AI starting to creep up and starting to be integrated into the life cycle. Similarly, for those who are more into the user design aspect of it, this is a commercial tool, so not open source. And but I came across it and I tried it out and I thought, man, this is pretty cool. So this cool tool called Wizard is basically like your one-stop shop with their new feature where you can use a single prompt, like say, hey, I want a weather app for planet Mars, click generate, and it starts to do all this magic. And you're right there after using this kind of auto designer capability. You're able to then go and edit these mockups or wireframes and so on and so forth and do your design, right? So you're again bringing AI into the world of the roles that are actually using them to do tasks and accelerating it that way, right? Um, and this one in particular, like I really wish that I had something like this when I was in school doing software engineering. But thinking about software design, whether it be your sequence diagrams or state machine diagrams or any kind of architectural or deployment model, you can now use AI to generate, these models that, again, usually take quite a bit of time for anyone to actually define initially, and then are just infeasible for us to update as stuff goes on. So we know typically we end up saying, hey, you know what, the code is the only kind of source of truth, right? Because we really can't keep pace with all these artifacts. Well, now with AI behind the scenes, and this is a tool called Diagram GPT by eraser.io, literally, like, you start to write a description of the problem you're trying to solve. Here, I asked for a cloud architecture of a social media application similar to Instagram, and then told it what technologies like AWS, EC2 for compute, use S3 for storage, and then watch it start to just generate in front of me the architectural model, right? And again, saving a lot of time. And it actually doesn't matter if the AI got it 100% correct in terms of what was in my mind. Now I have something already that I can work with that took me very little time to actually create, and it's probably quicker for me to move those things around and edit this, or tell the AI like, hey, you got this part wrong, and guide it in the right direction, than to build this from scratch, right? So check it out, eraser.io, Diagram GPT, very cool tool for building these diagrams. I'm sure there are others. Of course, a lot started out thinking about GitHub Copilot. And so, we aren't thinking about just IntelliSense to help us with method signatures, but entire code block generation, right? Using this, again, within the development environment, right? And in a similar way, at EPAM, we built a tool called Alita, which kind of has evolved, but it started off thinking about software testing and test automation and test engineers who are living, again, probably within the IDE and don't want to go into a separate chat window to generate code. They need it to live in the IDE. And so by having those capabilities actually just be there and being able to generate complete sets of automated test code within that same environment and then validate them and execute them, that was golden, right? So here we just generated a set of Java code for a program, and it really pulls a lot from the IDE. So it pulls from the project and says, hey, this is the language that we're using, right? This is the prompt. The prompt actually lives in the code itself and can evolve in the code. And you now have like all of these capabilities at your fingertips as you build test automation, right? Whether it be at the UI level, unit level, or integration level. This is a unit level example here. And then last but not least is thinking about the pipeline and CI/CD. And actually, it was this example. We have a group that has built a project called InfraPhoenix that leverages like our experience using and building CI/CD pipelines to use AI to accelerate that activity. So there's AI that's driving and executing and pushing out the Terraform code. There's AI that's analyzing the pull requests and the comments in the pull requests and so on and so forth. There's AI in the application code itself, right? Like similar to what we just talked about unit test generation or to explain portions of the code. And this is leading to AI actually becoming part of defining the quality gates, right? And handling issues within the pull requests and fixes themselves. So this particular aspect of it is what started to trigger for me the fact that we're definitely, number one, going beyond testing, even when we start to think about testing, because the ultimate thing that testing will do in a modern software development life cycle is actually try to automate these quality gates, right? So what are we really trying to do as we look at becoming more productive throughout the life cycle? We are typically saying like, yes, we want to push stuff out there faster through automation, but then quality becomes a key set of checkpoints, right? And so it reminds me of this mantra that we had at Ultimate Software, Q equals P, which stands for quality equals productivity. So what we're saying is that this is an equation, and at any point, if quality drops, then the other side of the equation is also impacted, and that also falls. Similarly, if quality goes up, then productivity also rises, right? And so what we're seeing, in my opinion, is that AI is actually automating quality engineering. And for some people, it sounds a little bit scary because they think of their jobs and what they're going to do. But this is not just singled out to one particular role. Remember, if you're thinking holistically about quality, you're talking about validation and verification at every single stage. And when we think about the life cycle and productivity, we're generating artifacts and generating content to help accelerate every single one of these activities and roles, everything from the product owner all the way through to actually testing and then deploying the product and doing DevOps, right? Um, and it's one of those things where you can think about testing in a vacuum, but it just makes it harder to actually do validation. Instead, we typically tend to think of building quality into a product, and AI is really helping us to do that. But it does raise like a few challenges that are kind of new because of this technology. And this is where I think for the future of testers to start kind of focusing their minds on what comes next and how do they actually support the ongoing transition that we're going through. But the first thing that comes to everyone's mind here is usually security. How can we make sure that we're using AI in a safe way? We're not leaking our own private information. And then what about the intellectual property upon which some of these models are trained when using LLMs or any of these pre-trained models? The second thing is that like we know already that it's very difficult to kind of really sometimes understand what these models are doing, and that goes down into making sure that you understand how to interact with the model and what types of things it might bring back, and doing that analysis. It's actually like a very experimental and testing type of mindset to be able to interact. And so there needs to be upskilling of engineering teams to understand exactly how to use this technology. So we'll talk about that, but that is definitely something that needs to happen. We also know that the models are fallible, right? Just as humans are. But sometimes, obviously, if you give the wrong input, you get the wrong answer. But sometimes you can give correct inputs, and it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to get the correct answer. And so, again, there needs to be some level of validation there. And then, you have a large quantity of information that's getting generated, and it can look correct to the untrained eye. But it can be very wrong. It can be something that was totally made up, and it sounds very convincingly right. And last but not least, like actually measuring productivity, or if you use Q equals P, measuring quality, in this case, is actually just non-trivial. And as I mentioned before, it's not just about faster output. And so where I see our trajectory kind of shifting is to really answering this question: is how do we successfully integrate generative AI for productivity, for quality, into the life cycle, right? And actually, I find myself these days, this is kind of like the biggest thing that I'm engaged in right now with consulting, is to say to organizations, well, first and foremost, you can have secure, enterprise-ready AI. And I'll get back to the collaborative part of it in a second. But one thing that's pretty cool at EPAM is that one of our first initiatives around all this stuff was to recognize that we need to have this secure proxy in place, which we have a project called AI Dial that has been rolled out enterprise-wide and that we leverage. But with AI Dial, the principle is just the same of like, hey, you need to make sure that whatever models you're using and whatever information you're sending and transmitting stays within your four walls if you want to make sure that there's no leakage, right? And you can do that, right? You don't have to use a public API for OpenAI, for example, and send your data across the wire, right? You can have your own enterprise instance on Azure, or if you're using Gemini or Google, it doesn't really matter. The principle is like, let's have these secure models be available, right? And so I can log in and I can access Claude, Gemini, any one of the models that I care about. I can actually build things on top of them, and I can be rest assured that this is all within my infrastructure. So that's kind of ground zero. The other thing that we're seeing is that with like the 𝐓𝐴LLITA example that I showed you before within the IDE and doing test generation, it started to become less about testing and more about like the collaborative nature of working on prompts together, developing them, sharing them across the board, integrating them into different the technology into different tools. And so 𝐓𝐴LLITA, instead of being kind of testing focus, has kind of grown into this AI collaboration platform where the secure models are behind the scenes and you're really enabling teams and organizations to work together to define the models that they need or customize the models that they need and build the tools that work for them. And so understand that like to me, like this secure, collaborative, enterprise ready AI is sort of the first thing that I think I see as a testing community we can help people navigate through, because we're thinking about all those concerns from the get-go. All right, so I don't like when people kind of step into the hype of AI and lose some core values, right? Prompt engineering, I think when first started to kind of surface, was kind of purported as like, this is the future of your career path. Like, in the future we'll have all prompt engineers and da 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 da, and like get a degree in prompt engineering. I don't even know if such a thing exists, but maybe it does by now. But a lot of that is hype, and the truth of the matter is that this is a necessary skill, not because this becomes your new career, but because everyone is going to be using these models, and understanding like how you actually get good results from these models and how you interact with them is of key importance, right? It's just like any kind of discipline that requires some foundational things. Like this is something that you have to bootstrap. And so me myself, like I've seen that actually like going through the process of learning how to experiment and kind of build good prompts is more valuable than thinking that you have like a laundry list of like the 10 best prompts that you're just going to use, right? So we have to bring that inquisitive mind to AI and generative AI in general to be able to achieve good results through prompting and prompt engineering. And this kind of led me down a path where I thought, like, you know what, this is so vital for the testing community. And while like I try my best to, in my trainings, kind of bring a lot of the practical side of things out there, I found a good opportunity to collaborate with Brightest and Artificial Intelligence United to actually build a certification that is primarily a hands-on certification. And that might sound like a oxymoron, but really there's over like 80 exercises in this certification, and that really help you to start to bring this towards something that you can use every day and iterate with. And the reason I kind of mention this is not necessarily to plug the certification. There's a big divide in our community about whether certifications are worth anything or not. For me personally, it was more of a, how do I help to influence and transform the space through teaching and training the trainers, right? And so my engagement here is really training a lot of people who are going to go out there and train others on how prompt engineering can really help, right? And of course, have fun in the process. Like I know both Jason Arbin and I have courses at these conferences on prompting, and they're very different in many ways, but also build on foundational principles. And last but not least, like in thinking about how to kind of navigate through the transformation to automating quality engineering, is understanding that like we're using AI to do all these things, but we need to make sure that we're in a space where we're validating and verifying the AI itself, right? And that's twofold. Number one, that's paying attention to how these models are built, how they're trained, and so on and so forth. And then also recognizing that once the model is deployed, that it can deviate or drift away from what you thought was happening. It can generate very new and interesting things, and there needs to be a level of testing that happens post deployment in production, right? And so it really takes a village, right? And I think that the testing community is that village. where we recognize that whenever we're talking about quality, that it involves multiple roles and bringing multiple stakeholders together to actually achieve this, right? Especially if you're going to pay attention to quality early, thinking about end users or thinking about the engineering process, whether it be the AI components or the core development components, thinking about security and so on and so forth. And so there needs to be this kind of holistic kind of shift left to quality engineering for AI and machine learning. And then what do we do on the tail end, right? And this is where LLMs become rather interesting to validate. Obviously, these are non-deterministic machines, right? Where you ask a question and it can give you different answers, no matter if you ask a question now, you ask it later. So a big part of this is just looking at the fact that there's many layers to this. It's easy to look at the surface of the AI, but you really have to go deeper, right? And so this is a visual of the testing iceberg. I wrote a couple articles on testing AI. And the key here is that, hey, like, let's make sure that we're looking at all of these dimensions, whether or not the model is hallucinating, if it's coherent. There's a level of user engagement if you're building a conversational model that you need to make sure that you check for, and for fluency and how it's understanding your context. There's responsible aspects of the model, so security, privacy, safety. And then if you're using it for some tasks like testing or requirements engineering, how practically useful is it, right? How informative or concise is it with respect to what you're trying to achieve? And so, again, I think that this is a space where, as you start to think about the future of AI and the future of quality engineering, we have to think that there's a symbiotic relationship here, where as testers, we need to make sure that we can trust these models. For AI to be trustworthy, it must be something that we can test. And so testability of AI systems becomes a big thing. Of course, we need to be able to control the system to test it and observe it. But with AI, we also need to be able to explain or have the AI explain why it came to certain decisions, right? And to me, these are all like wide open areas. If you start to think about the software lifecycle and what we mentioned before, if the AI can start taking over a lot of the tasks that we might be doing today manually, where does it leave us as experts in testing? And I think that this is where it leads us to. We understand how to pick apart and dissect things and look at where things might not be as they seem. And this area of explainable AI is just about that. Do we have explainable data, right? So what data did we use to train the model or fine tune it, right? What about the predictions? Can we look at the predictions and see like, hey, why did it come to certain conclusions? Which features contributed to and weights contributed to this particular prediction? And then overall, the algorithms need to be explainable. And, you know, I think that as we, as a community, start to step into like what is happening to us and start to accept it, I think that we'll start to see that this is all good change. Of course, there's dangers, but we are starting to see that we're moving to this fully autonomous software development and testing, right? And of course, like you probably heard about Devon AI, there's some things there that were real, some things that were fake. I just saw a video the other day on Co-Tester. This is not an endorsement of that product, but talking about the fully autonomous software tester. The truth is that like there is a push towards having agents automate a lot of what has been done traditionally by software engineering and testing roles. And we've always had automation as part of life in general, and it changes the way that we do things. And really, my vision here is that I think we're going to see much more of this. And I've been very fortunate to like work with people that are very like-minded in the sense that we see these things coming in waves, right? Like we started off with basic IntelliSense, right? And now we're seeing that there's a lot of co-pilots, right? Even look at the marketing for a new Windows PC, like it's all about co-pilots. But there's another wave that has already started. This is the wave where we're seeing like a big demand for, can we put more on the actual AI, right? Humans will still be in the loop, so there's humans with agents in this second wave, and as we have humans in this loop, it's all great because we are validating, we're verifying, but there will come a point. This is what always happens in AI, right? The first set of GANs that generated images were easy to spot that they weren't real, right? And now you can't hardly tell like what is real from what is fake. There comes a point where the AI can actually take over that task with enough human feedback. And so I think we're going to start to see agents with humans in software development, right? Which just means that the agents are the dominant and primary ones actually doing most of the work. And humans are kind of giving the oversight. And then full autonomy would mean that the agents are actually trusted to completely take over this task, right? And maybe even someday we have these autopoietic agents where when we start to think about self-organizing agents, or what happens with super intelligence beyond the scenes, becomes something that's interesting here to think about. But these are the waves, right? My buddy Adam Arbach and Artem Ruzimenko are working hard, like to think about like how the future will unfold using this technology, and it's pretty cool to kind of start to think that maybe the agents are going to take over, right? So to start rounding up, I think that no matter what, like we know that this technology is here to stay. We know it's more than testing, right? We've gone beyond testing at this point to look at the whole software development lifecycle. And we also know that there's going to be people out there using this for good, and there's going to be people kind of using this for not so good things, right? And so I think my encouragement as a community is to say, like, let's embrace the future. Let's not think that, like, you know, just because things may change and job functions may change, that anything is going to stop this. But start thinking about what will make it successful. And really, the truth is that we need ethics frameworks around AI. We need to make sure it's transparent, it's responsible, there's enough governance, it is explainable. And this is where I think the testing community it really has like a core part to play in this, right? So I encourage you to think beyond that, because at least for me, it really boils down to the fact that I think of the future that my children are going to grow up in. They're already living with AI, and I want it to be something that really doesn't harm them, and that really supports them as they are able to use it in whatever capacity it ends up being. So with that, I'll pause there and take any questions.
Thank you, Tariq, for that incredible session. Your ideas you shared about leveraging AI to automate just not testing, but the quality itself are truly game changing. And your perspective around future of AI in quality engineering has given lot of things to think about.
Well,
We just have a couple of more minutes for the session and pick up few questions.
sure.
We also had Jason joining the chat, interacting with attendees. Thank you, Jason. Uh, the first question: how can organizations strike a balance between AI-driven automation and conventional testing methods to ensure comprehensive coverage and reliability?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that as with anything, especially when you start talking about number one, automation, testing, and striking a balance, like everything should sort of be risk based, right? I think you want to find an area where you can safely start applying this technology because in some things there will be like this learning curve, and you don't want to be learning and experimenting on something that's mission critical. So finding that area or set of use cases where you can start and get that experience and applying it there, and also make sure that that use case is something that brings value. There are a lot of these things in testing that people don't want to do, actually a lot of testing itself that people don't want to do, and kind of pawning it off to AI is a good win-win, right? Because you can use it to actually get some efficiency gains as well as provide you value and learn how this technology can be applied. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Jason. Uh, The next question: how do you see? Is there any initiative to work on ethical part of AI?
Yes, there's lots of initiatives to work on the ethical part of AI. Dr. Joy Bulamwini has a really good book called Unmasking AI, and she started the Algorithmic Justice League. I follow that quite a bit. Um, so I follow her and I follow her work, and in doing that, I've met quite a few others that are kind of in that alliance. So I can definitely point folks to where ethical AI and this responsible AI is big. I mentioned, of course, explainability. Explainability plays a key role in all of that as well. Um, but follow the Algorithmic Justice League if you want to really kind of get some insights into what is out there and what needs to be done in this space.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. Uh,
Tariq,
thank you.
sorry, the second time you call me Jason.
Sorry. Thank
All good, man. I
I
know.
was
I gotta
just
go and see what Jason was saying in this chat that made you remember.
yeah, he was interacting. I was just reading Jason's message and then I got carried away. I'm so
No
sorry,
worries.
Tariq. We are just about on time. So just a quick reminder to everyone: this session, with all along other sessions in TestMu, are recorded, and you can just find them later on Lambda Test YouTube channel. Also, we will be sharing this session with you in with via emails. So if you want to revisit today's talk, or if you want to share it with your team or your peers, feel free to do so. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you again, Tariq, for a wonderful talk.
Thank you, Sparks. Thanks for having me.